Hi, I'm Robby Skrobarczyk. My research project entailed recreating a torso in a full-body OpenSim model that's being used to track the progression of the rehabilitation process for baseball players recovering from injuries. So, financially, the league has reason to optimize their current rehabilitation protocols. In 2015, the MLB League paid $84 million dollars to replace players that were put on the disabled list. Furthermore, abdominal injuries have increased 22% since the 1990s. These stats reflect the careers of players like Juan Uribe, who's depicted to the right. In this photo, Juan Uribe is up to bat against the St. Louis Cardinals. Unfortunately, in this game, Juan Uribe left with an abdominal injury, which was later diagnosed to be a sports hernia. Juan Uribe retired a few years later because of the laundry list of injuries he accrued over his career. So, proper rehabilitation can not only save money, but it can also save players' futures. Our project aims to help players get back to swinging shape. So, the typical swing has five main parts: the stance, the stride, the drive, bat acceleration, and follow through. Injuries can mess up one or more of these portions of the swing. Now, general recovery from injuries is a 5-stage protocol that rehabs a subject back into playing shape. This protocol, depicted below in blue, includes everything from dry swings all the way to live hitting from a pitching machine. Moreover, the player progression through a low, medium, and high range of effort occurs at each of the following stages. However, these phases may go much slower or quicker depending on the injury. This protocol is supposed to create a path of linearly progressing effort that equally distributes the workload across the rehabilitation period. However, there's no published data supporting or refuting this existing assumption that work is equally distributed across the rehabilitation program. By creating measurable parameters to try and depict the player's effort at each phase of the rehab process, we can find room for improvement on current recovery protocols. So we used motion capture setup to use and track the player's effort during the rehab process. This picture is a great example of our motion capture setup. So we had 18 motion capture cameras, 4 of which you can see in the photo, encircling our batting subject. We have 8 AMTI force plates, which are located beneath the subject. And then finally, we have our 78 passive markers placed all along the subject. All the motion capture equipment helps gather data points of the subject's movement throughout the swing, and gathering the necessary data helps us create quantifiable parameters that can be used to evaluate effort as well as the risk for further injury. However, in order to model the kinetic and kinematic forces during the swing, we're utilizing OpenSim. So OpenSim is an open source musculoskeletal simulation software that uses imported motion capture data to model real-life events of a human model. This software allows us to digitize every movement that the subject made during the recording process. Digitizing this allows us to take the markers and calculate the parameters like joint forces and moments throughout the batter's swing. And if we implement this throughout the 5-stage progression protocol, these parameters will help us better depict the amount of effort a batter is putting forth at each stage of the rehab process. Unfortunately, this simulation is only as good as its model, and the 2 models we utilize do have some design flaws. So, with my research project, my objective was to optimize the trunk rotation in the more complicated full body model. I was to do this by first isolating the part of the code that deals with trunk rotation. I was then tasked with removing the range of motion restrictions for the full body model. Additionally, I would ensure all vertebrae are factored into the range of motion calculation. And then lastly, I had to verify that these corrections accurately represent the trunk rotation. Visualizing the model is not only a great way to verify that the modifications worked, it's also one of the best ways to see the differences between models. So, as you look at the 2 models, you can initially observe that the Robby model, the one depicted on the left, is much more complex than the Rajagopal model on the right. Although much more detailed, the Robby model restricts its motion way before a quarter turn of the body. However, it does a great job of limiting the lumbar vertebrae movement with pivoting joints. That is, joints that allow for rotation in between 2 cylindrical bones. In contrast, the Rajagopal model's range of motion is unrestricted. However, its vertebrae between the L1 and the S1 joints are defined as a ball and socket joint. This joint type for vertebrae allows for unreasonable movements for the model. Because of this, the Rajagopal's research paper discussing their model also mentions that their model's upper body is for gross movement only. So the picture to the left is a great example of the trunk rotation moment in motion. The diagram in the center depicts what I will refer to as torso rotation. That is the angle created when the line going through both shoulders begins to turn off axis from the line going through both hip joints. This movement occurs across what we call the transverse plane. If you look at the diagrams on the right, we have two different sections of the spine model mapped out. The section in the blue depicts the vertebrae that the Rajagopal model takes into account when calculating out torso rotation. So when a subject undergoes torso rotation, each of your vertebrae rotates slightly. If you don't take this into account, your torso rotation angle will actually be inaccurate. The Rajagopal model fuses nearly every single vertebrae together, pretending that the spine is entirely fixed. And this rotation actually accounts for every single rotation in between the hip and the shoulders. Unfortunately, with the Robby model, the model only accounts for L5 to L1 vertebrae rotation, as seen in the diagram depicted in green. This significantly undermeasures the trunk rotation for a subject by leaving out the rotation of the thoracic spine as well as the motion in between the L1 vertebrae and the hips. So this, along with the range of motion differences, will be seen in the next graph. So I'd like to direct your attention to the green line graphs depicting the results of two different swings for the unedited Robby model. While looking at the green graph for both trials, you can see where the unedited Robby model significantly restricts the range of motion at the end of the batter's swing, as it's maxed out around 10 degrees. Without being able to catch the end of the swing, you can't determine the range of motion or the joint angle moments as the batter reaches the end of the swinging cycle. When comparing my edited Robby model's red graph results to the green graphs, you can see the improvements I made allow for the subject's full range of motion to be calculated. We can confirm that we made progress towards improving the accuracy of trunk rotation in existing models by comparing these results to the blue baseline results created by the custom Python code that my graduate student Joe made. Overall, though, you can see that these changes improve the accuracy of the model, and improving the model's accuracy, again, helps us better gauge a subject's effort during the rehab process. Nonetheless, there is still more progress that could be made for this model. So we need to confirm that the additional data sets and proper scaling of the models confirms the improvements, as well as determine any root causes of any discrepancies that arise. In future projects, we could also work to define joints for the individual thoracic vertebrae instead of fusing them together the same way both models did. This will gain us a more accurate representation of the swing motion. Finally, we can use the same method of redefining joints to optimize additional joints in the body. This will also help with the accuracy of the model and the batting progression. So I'd like to thank everyone that has been a part of this project, including my graduate students, Joe and Aaron, all of whom have been pivotal during the education and learning process.